You're listening to Psych Up on the Casozo Radio Network. And now your host, psychologist and author, Dr. Suzanne Phillips.
Welcome to Psych Up on Casozo Radio. I'm Dr. Suzanne Phillips, the host of Psych Up. My goal and the goal of my guests is to discuss any and all topics of importance in your life from a psychological perspective. Together with you, the listeners, we want to invite thinking, examine issues, and expand understanding, essentially make you an expert in your own life. Today, we're going to be talking about social media. Now, we all know that social media is here to stay. 91% of adults use cell phones. 500 people interact with Facebook daily. And grandparents from all over wave to grandchildren very far away through Skype. We also know, however, that there are many dimensions to social media. So our topic tonight is social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Joel Evans with us tonight, who's going to really help us address this. Dr. Evans comes with a wealth of knowledge and experience in social media on many levels. Dr. Evans is an RMI Distinguished Professor in the Zarb School of Business at Hofstra University on Long Island in New York. He is the co-author of two major books, Marketing and Retail Management. One is headed into its 12th edition, the other its 13th. Both are used internationally and are available in English, Chinese, and Russian. Professor Evans has won countless awards, including 4 Hofstra Zarb School of Business Dean Awards. He was the MBA Teacher of the Year, and many more. He consults for a number of firms and has been interviewed in many media formats, newspapers, TV. I know that he's already appeared on the local news with them asking him about his predictions for the coming shopping season. Professor Evans has been following social media for the past 10 years and teaching it on a graduate level to master's and MBA students. He's often called upon to speak about behaving well online, especially with social media. He writes 2 blogs weekly on marketing and retailing, both of which have hundreds of posts and a worldwide following. He also has 2 Twitter accounts and manages the LinkedIn accounts for the marketing and international business departments of Hofstra University. Professor Evans, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Psych Up.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
Well, we see what our topic is, the good, the bad, and the ugly of social media. So I thought we'd start out with the good. What would you say social media has added to our lives in a positive way?
I think there are a huge number of things that are positive about social media. I think as people and as shoppers, we're much smarter today. The playing field is much more level between us and the companies that we buy with. We could find almost any piece of information online. We can compare prices. We can get customer reviews. We can get all of this stuff instantly. We can get tips on almost any subject that there is. Angie Hicks, who people are probably familiar with through Angie's List, actually started her website as a small company based upon the fact that she had a number of unhappy experiences with service people, and she's now built this into a huge business of Angie's List where people pay to subscribe to it. So we rely very heavily on our peers, and we trust them a lot more than advertising. According to research, when we shop, 70% of us trust our friends and our colleagues for their advice, but only 10% of us trust advertisers. And I think part of that is self-inflicted by the advertisers. I think that we have the ability now to communicate our frustrations and our complaints, as well as good things online. And a lot of times when they hit social media, that hits a sore point with companies so that they feel compelled to respond. Before, when we were addressing them, let's say in a private note of some kind or a private telephone call, they really didn't have the compunction to respond. But these days, since so many hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of people can read a post, they're much more likely to respond.
We're empowered in a way we never were before, especially when it comes to goods and services.
Yes, as I said, the playing field is much more level. Traditionally, communication was one way. It was the company as an advertiser blasting stuff at us. But now communication is two-way, and to some extent it's beyond the control of the company because the consumers have taken over. And as I said, we have so much more information, so much more knowledge, so much more ability to compare prices that it's harder for companies to pull the wool over our eyes. But we also have to make sure that we don't get carried away, because there was a story about a guy who they lost his baggage with British Airways, and he decided that he would not only go on Twitter to complain, which was fine, and he had a number of people doing that, but he took $1,000 and took out sponsored tweets so that he could, blast the company. So I think you can go a little bit too nuts over it.
It's true. Let me ask you this, since I know you're someone who uses information for research and all that you publish. When you talk about information and being empowered, certainly in the marketing area and the retail area, what you just said is so important. I wanted to ask you this because the question came up. We certainly have an expanded information base now that we have the internet. And the question was asked to Betsy Sparrow, who's at Columbia. Well, does this mean that people won't have as good a memory as they had before? What do you think about it? And I want to know what you think about her answer. What she said is, actually, most people, if they're going to tackle a difficult problem nowadays, will figure, I can get my information online. And people really decide whether or not they need to remember certain things if they could find it online. She said, I'm far less concerned with people remembering details or facts. People will empower themselves because what they seem to remember is the site, the website, or the way to use the internet to get their information. So she did not see this as something that detracted from our intelligence, our problem solving, our research, but rather as an enhancement, a kind of transactive memory, something we could utilize. What would you say?
Well, I think that certainly as we all get older, we have certain parts of our memory that aren't as good as others. But I also think that what we develop over the years is tools where we can compensate. And I don't think there's anything better than the internet and social media to be able to compensate. I mean, when I was younger, I used to go into class and I'd have all of my notes memorized, and I probably, looking back, was more like a robot, but my brain was overflowing. These days I use PowerPoints, which are an aid to me when I teach, and all I have is bullet points, and all I need is really the one word to prompt my memory to get me going. So when you talk about online, I mean, one of the things that's fascinating is that given how fantastic Google is that you could put in a search term and find almost any piece of information that you're looking for. You forgot who starred in the movie, you have a debate. You're trying to figure out if this old-time actor that you remember, are they still alive? You know that you saw a product that was advertised and you want to find out, is it really good? So you type in, XYZ as the product name, and some of the first posts the first listings that come up are the websites that do reviews, like Yelp or or Amazon, the reviews on Amazon. So we not only have the ability to find an incredible amount of information, but we also have the ability to really easily and quickly get our peers' information and feedback. So I don't think we need that raw, what we would call unaided recall, where we have to try to get into the recesses of our mind and remember everything about a situation. What we need is a prompt. So I think the most important thing, memory-wise, with social media and the internet, is just knowing how to search and knowing how to use the tools. And once we have that, plus the fact we have all of these self-help sites, whether it's WebMD or it's Ancestry.com, or we could trace our lineage. There are so many things that we could do where we only have to remember a couple of key words and we're off and running. We could also go into chats or belong to all types of groups where there are other people who have similar medical conditions, they have similar complaints about companies, we could find people who have situations that are very similar to ours, and all we needed to get started was that one key word.
That's such a good transition for us, because when you say we can access groups of other people who are facing similar problems, who have already done some research and know and can discern a product, a doctor, etc., you bring us to our next set of benefits, which is the question of social and interpersonal benefits. Now, what would we say about that?
Well, I'll have a couple observations on that. One is that we can really catch up on people that we've lost touch with. So there are sites like Classmates where you could find the people that you went to high school with, for example, and people could have a lot of fun with that. You can look up people's names. You could Google them. You could go to Facebook. You could go to LinkedIn. You could go to any number of sites and see if you could track the people down. So I've looked for friends. I've looked for former students. And a lot of times it works out really well, but sometimes one could get disappointed. So the story I would have on that is that when I was a kid, we had moved around a lot, so I didn't have a lot of friends, but I had one friend who we were like best buddies, and we lost contact with each other. And a few years ago, I found him through social media, and I emailed him, and it was probably, let's say, 40 years since I had seen him.
Wow.
And he wrote me back, and he said, "Why are you bothering me now?" And it's like I was so taken back.
Oh,
he was
my
my
goodness.
one buddy.
Aw.
And he's so sometimes
they're
it works out,
disappointments,
sometimes
yes.
it doesn't.
But you bring us to the other topic, which is, dating, finding a mate, all of that has been vastly changed by social media. What are we saying now? 1 in 3 marriages begin with online dating?
Right. There are a lot of numbers out there. I'll pop out a few. But I think that what happens is that dating is something that is hard for a lot of people to get started with, of going on a blind date or going to a bar or a party or something and then trying to meet somebody. So by going on the internet, you can, in a quiet way, where the person doesn't know a lot of your contact information, your phone number, your address, whatever, that you can be shy and interact with the person, have, in essence, online dates where you communicate back and forth for a while, and then maybe end up meeting on neutral territory, which could be a coffee shop or something, and meet each other. So here are some numbers that I have. 37% of recent daters have asked somebody out by texting them. So that's using texting to date. 1/6 of social media users post about their relationships. So, matter of fact, Facebook even has within their parameters your ability to say in a relationship. So a lot of people do that they're proud that the person who's shy and inhibited, that has the ability to proclaim without having to go out and yell to people that here I am and I'm in this committed relationship.
Right.
According to the most recent research, 70% of single adults in the United States have at least tried online dating. So we're
Wow.
talking about more than 2/3.
Wow.
And as you said, 1 in 3 marriages begin in online dating, and 3 in 5 gay couples meet online, where there may again be a tendency to be shy and introverted, and it's a great way to meet people.
It's very interesting. One thing that I'll pass on from people who've used online dating is, as Joel says, it's great as a door opener, but the sooner you move from the back and forth online to the cup of coffee in Starbucks or wherever, the more you actually come to find out if that's a viable partner or a date that can take you somewhere else. In the interest of time, let's move on to how we might look at some things that aren't so good about our involvement with social media. We talk about the bad. Let's start talking about that a little bit before we have to take a break. What are some of the things that people might want to look for or worry a little bit about in terms of social media?
I think that it's very easy to become obsessed with social media and lose track of time and get so involved in it that we lose track of other activities, or we don't become involved with as many activities. And it's gotten so bad in the workplace that a lot of companies have taken steps to block employees from accessing social media. 1 in 5 companies have blocked social media, Facebook, and 1 in 6 have blocked Twitter. So what they have found is that people at work have become so diverted into social media while they think that they're multitasking. This is another word, this is another term that is really fascinating. As I teach my classes and they're all sitting there with their thumbs on their smartphones, and they're telling me, I'm paying attention. Well, obviously a lot of companies feel that that's not necessarily true. But we've also found out through research is that among younger people, younger adults, that they not only are they not developing their interpersonal skills, they are also not talking on the phone as much as they used to before. The average adult spends 2 hours and 20 minutes on their mobile media not talking. So that means texting, surfing the web. So and it's even higher among the teenage population. So people are losing track of their social skills, the other activities that go on. What is really scary to me is that 1 in 6 children ages 8 and younger uses a mobile device daily. And I wonder about their social development. I wonder if their parents think about how safe that is because of all this tracking mechanisms, and kids like to respond to messages regardless of who they may be from. That also is opening up a whole can of worms.
Well, the other thing that we might think about in terms of the little ones is the constant riveted attention on, let's say, even the games on these little devices really sets in motion a lack of tolerance for anything that's not highly stimulating, so that it almost becomes addictive. They really would prefer not to eat, some children, than to put that down. From the time they get up, they want to play. So that we really have to think about, as you say, what are we setting in motion in terms of diversity of activity?
And it's also because these activities that they do on the phone or online are stimulating, but they also have to be fast. So what my observation is the attention span is lower. So you can get a person in 2-minute clips. So the most popular YouTube videos aren't videos that are 15 minutes or 10 minutes. They're 3 minutes.
We're going to hold it right there. You've been listening to Psych Up with Dr. Suzanne Phillips and guest Professor Joel Evans. We're talking about social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we'll be right back.
Hey there, this is Christine Andrew, president of Casozo. Anyone who knows us at Casozo knows that we believe in doing things right and with a passion. You'll see the evidence of that in our publications, in our radio shows, and on our incredible website, if I do say so myself. The bottom line is that I highlight what I believe in most. And most recently, that has been Tom Matt's book, Maximize Your Quality of Life, The 200% Solution. Part biography, part brain science, part social commentary of the last several decades with all kinds of information that will help you live a happier, healthier life. This book will do exactly what the title says, help you live your life to the max. The book helps you to be the best that you can be and gives you the tools to do it. Tom Matt's made it easy, and so have we. You can come to Casozo.com, that's COSOZO.com, to get the book. And of course, you can get it on boomersrock.us and Amazon.com too. Get your copy today and start maximizing the quality of your life.
Hi, you're listening to Psych Up on Casozo Radio with Dr. Suzanne Phillips, and we're speaking tonight about social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Our guest tonight is expert Professor Joel Evans, speaking to us. We're just talking about the downside, particularly some of the bad aspects of social media. I wanted to share a story which was shocking to me, and that is a month ago, they report that a killer with a gun walks into a train in San Francisco, and people, the passengers, are so riveted on their iPads and their smartphones that the surveillance tape shows that this person was waving the gun at least 3 or 4 times, aiming at different people unnoticed. The passengers did not notice until he actually shot someone. I mean, the horror of this and the potential danger of being so out of touch in the moment that such a crime could happen is really dramatic. Wouldn't you say, Joe?
Yes, but unfortunately that doesn't surprise me because people get wrapped up in their world. I mean, we're not that far away from Manhattan, and people are wandering around in their cell phones and they're bumping into each other, and they're getting rammed by cars as they go into intersections and they don't pay attention. That's why I worry a lot as we get to this era of Google Glass. So that somebody's going to be wearing a pair of glasses, and in the corner of their right eye, they're going to have smartphone connections, the internet.
Oh, my goodness.
And it's like, you must be kidding. And you have all the issues about walking. You have a lot of states that are already preparing to have changes in the law with regard to driving. Can you imagine somebody that's got these glasses on, and in the corner of their eye, they're looking at an internet connection or they're looking at a text message? Google has been under tremendous criticism, and I think that's part of the reason why they haven't yet officially commercialized the product.
Now, I know you wanted to talk about a global survey with respect to communication skills and social media.
Yes, so on top of everything else that we do, we're diverted by social media, and we're amused and we ignore other people. There was a global survey that was done recently, which, my first reaction was, wow, you must be kidding. 46% of the global respondents to a survey said that they text, email, and check social media during a meal with family. So here we are, that what used to be a sacred tradition of the family, at the very least, gets together for dinner or Sunday dinner, and you sit down and you talk to one another, that everybody's now got their cell phone on the table, and as soon as a text message comes up, they're responding to it.
Well, it fits in with what Sherry Turkle speaks about. She's an MIT professor, Sherry Turkle, and she talks about the flight from conversation, and it just fits in exactly with this. What she's saying is that we keep asking more and more from technology and less from each other, and we can't benefit from a machine if we want to really look at the kind of qualitative connection we make with family members, partners, even people we work with, that doesn't come from a question and an answer. That is, it comes from eye-to-eye contact. It comes from a conversation that begins and for which we don't necessarily know where it's going to head. What she says is the depth of conversation is lost. This is even more dramatic because there's not a chance of it happening if everyone sitting at the table is hooked into social media. Her point is what they search for in that social media is what they can't find because they're missing it in the very moment of sitting with the family and not engaging with them.
And what's happened is that the messages, whether it's Twitter with 140 characters or with us texting, is the two things that seem to be missing to me are the context and the nuance. I mean, tone of voice, inflection, being able to look somebody in the eye, those all matter. But I think of, an example with texting where you're just going back and forth with somebody, and then they end the conversation with, "I'm having a bad day." And you could sit there and say, well, what does that mean? Did you have a heart attack? Did something happen with your spouse? Did somebody spill coffee? What does that mean? So it's that quick burst of a message, and then we're off to something else without any context, without any nuance. What does it mean? So I think there's a lot of that where we're using abbreviations, right? We're using smiley faces, and the whole feeling or knowing what the person actually means.
Well, it's a great source of contention with couples when they misread what that means. It's a tremendous source of anxiety for teens who said something and thought it meant one thing and it was misinterpreted. And then, as you say, in much of what you write, it goes viral. And once it's out there, the rumor is not coming back. So that it can be the launching pad for a real nightmare. And it really was based on the lack of cues. You know, the more we reduce it to a little text message, the multiplicity of cues becomes increasingly less. So you have less and less real possibility of knowing what that other person was talking about. And that brings us to something I know you have a lot of concern and write about, which is once it's out there, it's very hard to bring it back. What can you say about that, Joel?
Well, unfortunately, that unlike, let's say, a written letter or a postcard where the receiver gets it and they rip it up and they throw it in the garbage and that's the end of it, when you post something to social media, it's there forever. Someone's going to find it. Someone's going to track it. There are pictures of me from 20 years ago that I'd like to go away. I've been quoted out of context. That's on there. You could find that too. Smartphones now with cameras that they're always going around taking shots of people. So you could just be, bending over and coughing. The picture could look like, you were drunk or something and shaking. We do enough things to ourselves where you can't press the return button once you put a tweet out there.
Right.
But there are so many things that we don't know that people are doing. They could be tagging us on their website. They could be saying something about us. I mean, here's an example of somebody that got themselves into trouble. It was a story this past week that colleges now are starting to look at what students do on social media. So it's not just a high GPA and a high SAT score. They're looking to see what the students are doing. So there was a student that was at a college recruiting event. I'll leave the school out of it. Was at a college recruiting event, and I guess was tweeting during the event and making fun of the other potential students that were sitting there with her and using foul language and didn't realize that as many companies and institutions do, they have automatic trackers that once in Twitter the name is mentioned, they get it. So she was immediately turned down, and it's just a sense of, do you not realize that once you do something like that, it is out and people will see it?
I think people don't realize that. It's so valuable that you're sharing it because people think that, that they are able to do anything and they're free to do it. But you're really reminding us that for as much as we get from social media, we have got to really understand that motive on our part and caution on our part and discretion really has to be a part of the game plan in using and really maximizing the best use of social media.
I think that what people need to recognize is that social media is public. They sometimes think it's private. Oh, Facebook is private. It's only open to my friends. But what about when your friend passes on a piece of information or tags you? Something on Twitter is not private between you and somebody else because anybody could go in and read it. So you have to go in with the assumption that every single thing you do with social media is public. And there's another area that, of things that it's seemingly more young people than older people do it. But there's this, this whole area of sexting. So young people call the idea of them holding up a camera to themselves, their cell phone, selfing. So what some of them do is it's a young man or a young boy and a young girl, young woman, who they self themselves, where they show. So the young girl pulls her top up and she sends it to the guy, and then what happens is the next day everybody in the high school knows about it.
Yes.
So there's a lack of recognition of that altogether.
We headed right into the ugly, and that's the part that breaks people's hearts. We've seen cyberbullying cause depression and suicide. We've seen marriages destroyed by things that are posted. That is something that we really have to take very serious.
There is no question about it. There are some things that are done by other people, but there are things that we do to ourselves that are also bad. I mean, let's take it from, there are some people that have no problem through social media breaking up with someone. And a listener may be sitting there and say, nobody would do that. Well, yes, they would. They do. People don't think. And part of it may even be inadvertent, but let's say that you've been in a relationship with somebody and both of you have the picture of the other person at your Facebook page, and it says in a relationship, and you go to the page the next day, the person may not have even talked to you, and the person is listed as single, and there's no picture of you. There's a public humiliation that is incredible.
Right. I think these are sometimes the ingredients, as you say, not only to a divorce, but to desperation and real problems with people. Sometimes the motivation is not so innocent. You know, we talk about the purposeful, the frenemies, embarrassing people. And of course, when we talk about cyberbullying, and I've written quite a bit on this, it's really the use of technology to terrify. And what I try to really help people understand is that I like the notion of thinking about bullying as a three-person event. And that is, there's the bully, there's the victim, and there's the bystander. There are thousands of bystanders. If that message about someone in the high school, the college, the neighbor comes up to you, whether it came up on your email or a text, and you think, wow, that's terrible, but you hit send and you pass it on, you are part of that experience of cyberbullying. That's the danger of it. There's no way cyberbullying stops unless the bystanders don't do it. When the bystanders actually stop it, we have a chance.
And that's the same thing that happens with the sexting, is that they think they're sending it to one person, and then one person sends it to one other person who thinks, wow, that's clever. So this is where the term viral really takes on a negative connotation. Right. And if you talk about whether it's the cyberbullying or the breaking a relationship in public, you're also taking a lot of people who are shy, introverted, who aren't looking to make public announcements about themselves, and absolutely humiliating and embarrassing them. So you have a shy person who may not have wanted to go to a bar or a club or something to start dating, and now you're publicly humiliating them through social media.
Right. We're going to have to, let me just interrupt you there for a minute, because it's such an important topic. We're going to take a quick break. You've been listening to Psych Up on Crisozo Radio with host Dr. Suzanne Phillips and guest Dr. Joel Evans. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You've been listening to Psych Up with Dr. Suzanne Phillips on Crisozo Radio. And I'm here with guest Dr. Joel Evans. And we've been talking about social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we're talking about the ugly at the moment. We were talking about cyberbullying, the importance of recognizing that if you're someone who sees that message come through and you hit send, you're a bystander that has promoted cyberbullying. So that's a really important thing to think about. And then you were mentioning, Joel, about the shy person who somehow gets caught in this web.
Yeah, I think a lot of the times that the cyberbullying goes on is the person who may be perceived as weaker, and what they really are is a shy, more introverted person who worries a lot, who maybe has a little bit lower self-esteem, and the cyberbullying could just, push them over the top. And when this stuff goes viral, it's like what happened a couple of years ago in Rutgers with, some of the videos that were taken that were put online. And unfortunately, the young person committed suicide because they were so upset at this becoming, a laughingstock situation. So I think that the cyberbullying ends up being the people who are the most vulnerable offline become even more vulnerable online because it's made more public.
Yes, absolutely. And the sense of what one young man had who was suicidal was that it was interminable. It wasn't going to end. How was it going to
Right,
stop?
right,
So
right.
it's really true what you're saying. That brings us to another sort of ugly piece of the social media, which is addictions. One concern, of course, is cyber addictions. That's the obsessive and compulsive use of porn, sexual images, online engagement with another person. And when you really read about it and look closely at this is a very difficult addiction to deal with. Because remember, when we think about addictions, one part of recovery is avoiding people, places, and things that are triggers of addiction. Well, you got to use the computer for work. Most people use it in their daily lives. This becomes very, very difficult. Abstinence becomes very difficult. It sometimes takes buying a new computer, being abstinent for a while. It's a very difficult addiction both to recognize, for anyone else to recognize in you, and to really recover from. It is not impossible, but it is difficult. And then there are some other addictions you mentioned, Joe, right?
Yeah, I think that people who are really into it have become obsessed. Because I would view obsessive compulsive that they spend hours and hours and hours and can't get out of it. Online gaming, and some of these games are so realistic, but they're also violent. They could be sexually tinged. You've also got people who have become addicted to gambling, or it's fed their gambling addiction. And you have all of these companies that are located outside the United States, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes on with that. And people they could lose money, they could lose the sense of reality, and they spend the time that they should be sleeping or conversing with other people just engage in these online activities.
And here's the fine line of moderation. Sometimes someone really is quite shy and social connection is difficult. For them, social media, virtual groups, gaming, etc., could be a very valuable avenue to pursue. But when it becomes an addiction, that
Right.
person who is shy to start with, they're not stepping outside of that bedroom or that living room. They are living their life through the internet, through the game, and that's where it starts to become probably far less healthy than we could ever imagine. Mm-hmm.
And whereas in the offline world, if a person wanted to gamble, they'd have to physically get dressed and go out and go to a place. Online gambling, online gaming, wow, you can be in your pajamas at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's really
Right.
low.
Right, there's no boundaries. Let's talk a little bit about advice. You have written so many blogs, hundreds of blogs. Let's talk about what you would tell our listeners in terms of, we've heard the good, the bad, the ugly. What do we want our listeners to know as advice for dealing with social media?
There are a lot of things that I could give as pieces of advice, so I'm just going to try to pick out some highlights. So I think the one feeding off what we just talked about with the addictions is that I think we have to not lose sight of the time that we spend, and we really have to say to ourselves, let's put ourselves on a budget for time for the social media that we're going to spend. Let's not spend 10 hours a week on Facebook and 15 minutes a week talking to people, either in person or on the phone.
Right.
I think we need to very much think before we say anything online in any forum. First of all, it may be misinterpreted. Somebody may not get that you told a joke. Jokes are the hardest things for people to understand when they're just written out. Right. So I think you have to be very careful, recognizing you can't take it back. It's there, and it's there in public for people to see. I think that people too often focus when they're on in groups like Facebook on the number of likes that they have. Anybody who thinks that they have 1,500 of their closest friends that they want to communicate with is only viewing that as a measure of their popularity. And what they're risking is that people who I would call frenemies, which are people who pretend to be your friends who really aren't, are there finding out information about you who could be malicious about it. You've got to be careful. I think that we need to be careful about letting companies communicate with us rather than the other way around. There's a term called opt-in, where I go to a website and I check a box that says, yes, you can send me stuff. Those are the only emails that we should be opening. I'm constantly amazed when I talk to smart people about how they don't have virus protection on their computers. Oh, I don't need it. There's no problem. No, you're wrong. There are so many potential viruses that are out there for which we need protection that they're making a big mistake. I also think that because we're in social media, and a lot of people who are in social media are in 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, and they all end up using their first name, their birthday, as a password in every single group that they're in, which violates two things. One is that they've made it so easy for people to get their identity, do identity theft, and pretend to be them because it's so simple. And secondly, that they're using the same one every time, so it means if you get into one, you get into all of them. So the piece of advice would be, what the experts say, is to use at least 6 to 8 characters, which should include at least one letter, at least one number, and at least one symbol, because that makes it harder for the hacker to get in. And if people were to see some of the statistics about how a professional hacker with a computer can get into 6-letter passwords, it's like under a minute.
Wow.
People should use multiple emails. We should use an email that's our serious account, where we only give that out to our friends. But then when we go online and we participate in a contest or we get somebody to send us a newsletter, give them a different address that's not the one where all the other stuff is out.
That's
another
great
one,
advice.
Another one, which as a professional person drives me crazy, is when somebody is on LinkedIn or someone is preparing their resume and sending it out, that their birthday is their professional sounding email. Really? So, John 1987. So not only does it look unprofessional, you're telling the person you're 26 years old.
Okay, we're going to have to stop here for a break. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Psych Up on Casozo Radio with host Dr. Suzanne Phillips and guest Dr. Joel Evans. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Psych Up on Casozo Radio with Dr. Suzanne Phillips, and I'm here with guest Dr. Joel Evans, our social media expert. Before we continue our conversation, I know that listeners are going to want to know more about you, Dr. Evans, and to read some of your many blogs. How would they find you or reach you?
Well, the two easiest ways to reach you, and thank you for asking, would be Evans on Marketing, EVANS on Marketing, all one word, .com. That's my blog. Or you can email me through Hofstra, which would be Joel, Joel, .r.evans, EVANS, at Hofstra, HOFSTRA.edu.
We were talking and we really listed the good, the bad, and the ugly of social media. And then Dr. Evans really gave us some important tips about protecting ourselves from some of the real downside and dangerous aspects of it. So we want to go back and maybe take a look, because social media really has given us a great deal of how can we use it to continue to enhance our lives as shoppers and consumers, our professional life, and maybe our personal life.
Well, if I start from a consumer perspective, as a consumer, we are the most empowered we have ever been in history. This is really the first time where the consumer is in charge of the communication. When things go viral, when we make a post and there are 1 million or 2 million people that are reading it, or there's a YouTube video that could go to 25 million people that end up viewing it, the company isn't in charge of us anymore. We're in charge. And they really are reading the posts at Facebook. They are reading the negative comments at Amazon. So it gives us an opportunity now to say to the companies, this is what we want and you need to do it. It is a way when there are special events, births and and birthdays and things to be able to congratulate one another. Or if through LinkedIn, the people that I'm connected with, I would on a regular basis be getting, these people have a new job or have been promoted, congratulate them. So I'd immediately, because that's me, go down the list, and I'd send them all back a note that says, congratulations, sounds great. So, imagine that you've gotten promoted, it's on your LinkedIn site, and you're getting congratulations from somebody. I got one last week, and within, I'd say, about 5 minutes, I got copies of 10 other people who had congratulated that person. So,
nice.
Think of the feeling that you get from that. Another thing that's happened is that kids and their grandparents are connecting.
Yes.
Because one of the trends that's going on is texting with children who have the phones, which may or may not be good, but they're interacting with their grandparents.
Right.
And that's pretty cool.
It's great. What you're suggesting is what people need, which is affirmation and the idea of affirming professional colleagues, the idea of a grandparent to hear from a little one. I mean, people used to live in the same houses. They don't do that anymore, but this is such a wonderful way of bringing families and generations together.
Absolutely.
Before we go on, one other thing we might think about, of course, is the fact that you can use social media to enhance family. We talked so much about this, as you say, survey, this global survey. Remember that the loving message to a spouse, the cheer up smiley face to a little one who is nervous about a test, the special message to someone who's in the military. Long-distance relationships really can be made to feel so much closer when we use social media in that regard.
No question. I have 2 adult daughters and my wife, and what happens is the 4 of us end up in a discussion thread. And that is a lot of fun. So we're all talking to one another, which through the phone or in person, we may not be seeing each other.
Absolutely. Now, I was wondering if, as we close tonight, if you could possibly give our listeners some final words of advice that they can take with them, Dr. Evans.
I would give 2 final tips. 1, when in doubt, don't press send or the enter button. Okay, sometimes we're it's so impulsive, particularly on something like Twitter or Facebook. Think about it first. Pause for a minute. If you have a doubt, don't send it. And then the last thing that I would say is online, you are your best friend. Don't be your own worst enemy. Don't have simple passwords. Don't give away too much. Fix your privacy settings on Facebook so that the whole world doesn't know what your birth date is or where you went to high school. Protect yourself. Be careful.
Thank you so much. Dr. Evans, you've been a real gift to our listeners tonight. They've heard so much from you. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in tonight. I want to thank the producer, Ezra Baker. You've been listening to Psych Up on Casozo Radio with Dr. Suzanne Phillips. We'll be back next week. Keep listening.